Come on, she's just the maid. Let her play, we could use some entertainment. The words left Alexander Reed's mouth like a casual flick of the wrist, but they sliced through the opulent room with precision. Laughter erupted across the executive lounge on the 50th floor of Veritas Corp's Chicago headquarters. Crystal glasses clinked. Someone from HR chuckled. A vice president raised an eyebrow, amused. In the middle of it all, standing by a polished marble column with a cleaning cart beside her, was Clara Evans' black uniform, name tag, faded gloves in her pocket, calm eyes still as stone. No one knew that Clara once played on national circuits as a girl from Southside, back when she was called the Rook Whisperer at 13 before her father's construction accident, before her mother's kidneys failed, before her scholarship disappeared, and the chessboard was boxed away for good. Now she mopped floors while CEOs gave speeches on innovation. Step right up. Alexander gestured toward the chessboard at the center of the room. We've got a seat open for tonight's guest of honor. Clara didn't respond. She walked forward slowly, steadily, pushing the cart aside. She stopped in front of the board and surveyed it with a quiet familiarity that made a few executives shift uncomfortably in their leather chairs. She knows how the pieces move, right? Someone murmured. Another laughed. It's not checkers, sweetheart. Clara sat down. I'll take black, she said plainly. Alexander blinked. Black. Feeling bold, are we? She didn't answer. She reset the pieces with fingers that moved from muscle memory. Not hesitation, no theatrics, no pride, just knowledge. The game began. Alexander opened with confidence, slinging out sharp, practiced openings he'd used in Ivy League tournaments and charity events. Clara responded like water-meeting stone silent, steady, inevitable. 5 moves in, he furrowed his brow. 10 moves in the room fell oddly quiet. At 13 he paused. At 19, his king was cornered. Checkmate Clara stood. Thank you for the game, Mr. Reed. I'll get back to cleaning now. She turned and pushed her cart toward the elevator like nothing had happened. But something had, and as the elevator doors closed behind Clara, something unspoken still lingered in the air, something stronger than applause, louder than laughter, respect. If this moment moved you even just a little, please hit like, to support Clara's confidence, rising above prejudice. Comment below where you're watching from. You never know who nearby might also need to witness this story. Alexander stared at the board. The room had stopped breathing. All he could hear was the faint hum of the ventilation system and the soft squeak of the maid's shoes on the marble tile. He didn't touch the board, didn't sip his bourbon. He just sat there staring at the place where she'd been sitting like he had just been played. Not in a game, but in a way that unraveled something deeper. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Reed wasn't sure if he'd been the player or the piece. Alexander Reed barely remembered the rest of that night. He remained seated long after Clara had left the room, ignoring the shallow laughter that fizzled out around him and the awkward glances from the board members who didn't quite know how to act after the boss had been publicly humiliated by the janitorial staff. When the last of the wine bottles had been corked and the room cleared for post-event cleaning, Alexander was still staring at the board. "Should I pack the board away, sir?" A junior assistant asked hesitantly. Alexander didn't respond. He just stood slowly and walked out, leaving the assistant with nothing but silence and a board still showing his defeat. He didn't sleep that night, not really. His downtown penthouse, usually a place of calculated minimalism and pristine order, felt strange, almost suffocating. He sat at the kitchen counter well past midnight, the city lights flickering against the glass walls, laptop open, fingers moving faster than his thoughts. He searched her name. Clara Evans. Dozens of results. None of them her. No LinkedIn, no social media that matched her face, no tournament records, no old chess blogs, just noise, other Claras, other lives. But not her. Not the woman who had quietly dismantled his strategy like she'd read his soul. By 3 a.m., he was inside the U.S. Chess Federation's digital archive, digging through years of junior tournaments in Illinois. Nothing. No Clara Evans in any finalist lists, no photos, no ratings. It was as if she had never existed in the world of chess. But that wasn't possible. That level of control, the way she absorbed his tempo and flipped it against him, wasn't born from casual play. That was discipline. That was memory. That was someone who used to be formidable. He zoomed in on a grainy photo from a 2009 local event, Southside Youth Invitational. One face in the crowd looked familiar. Same quiet gaze, same tilted head, same braid tucked behind one ear. The name beneath it, Clara E. That was all. He exhaled sharply, closed the laptop, and rubbed his face. What was he even doing? This wasn't about revenge, not really. It wasn't about ego either, at least not the kind he was used to. This felt more like being undone. He hadn't just lost a game. He'd been seen by someone the world refused to see. The next morning, he canceled 2 investor calls and showed up at Veritas Corp headquarters wearing the same black shirt from the night before. His executive assistant raised an eyebrow. "You okay, Sir Fine?" he said curtly. "Just schedule light today." Then he did something he had never done in his 10 years as CEO. He took the service elevator down to the facilities level. It smelled like disinfectant and old paint. The lighting flickered overhead. He passed janitors who nodded in confusion, maintenance workers who froze mid-step. He didn't care he was looking for her. But Clara wasn't on shift. A clipboard in the cleaning office listed her as off-duty for 2 days. No phone number, no address, no emergency contact. Back in his office, Alexander paced. He opened the internal employee directory and found nothing more than her badge ID and shift hours. He considered calling HR, but knew better. They'd spin it into an HR violation, a harassment case, a legal fireball. Instead, he waited. 2 days passed. On the 3rd morning, he stayed late in the executive lounge, pretending to review architectural drafts for the upcoming product launch. He left the board out on purpose. He even reset the pieces white, facing him. By 11:43 p.m., he heard the soft squeak of a cleaning cart entering the hall. Clara pushed it in slowly. She didn't flinch when she saw him. Her eyes met his with that same stillness, like a pond that didn't ripple even when the sky thundered. He stood. "I didn't mean to humiliate you," he began, voice quieter than intended. "You didn't," she said simply, pulling on gloves. "You asked for a game. I gave you one." Alexander cleared his throat. "You're good." "Used to be," she replied, wiping down the edge of a conference table. "A long time ago, he walked over to the board. Where'd you learn Clara didn't answer right away?" She moved to a side counter and began spraying cleaner. "My dad taught me. He was a steel worker, played in the park with other men who came off shift. I used to watch. And tournaments I stopped before high school." "Why?" She looked up. "Because hospitals don't run on dreams and little sisters don't feed themselves." Alexander didn't know what to say. Clara turned back to her cart. He stepped toward the board. "Play again, not for show, just for me." She hesitated. No audience, no jokes, no cameras, just us. The silence stretched between them like a drawn-out breath. Then she walked to the table, pulled the black pieces toward her, and said without looking at him, "If you open with the King's Gambit again, I'm flipping the board." Alexander smiled despite himself and sat down. They played. This time she didn't go for the throat. She held the tempo in her palm and let him struggle to read it. 34 moves in. They reached a quiet draw. She stood. "I should mop before the wax sets." Alexander looked at the board. "You're the most disciplined player I've ever faced." She shrugged. "Discipline's easy when the rest of your life is chaos." As she pushed the cart away, he called out, "Clara." She paused. "I'd like to play again." She nodded once over her shoulder. "Then leave the board set." And just like that, she was gone again. Only this time, Alexander wasn't left humiliated. He was left intrigued and humbled. Alexander didn't speak of Clara to anyone. Not to his board, not to his assistant, not even to the therapist he visited twice a month, mostly out of obligation. He didn't need to. Something had shifted. And for a man who'd built an empire on data profit curves and polished PR language, that shift unsettled him in ways no market crash ever had. Every night for the next 2 weeks, he stayed late in the executive lounge. Not every night yielded a game. Some nights Clara came in, nodded politely, and went about cleaning, while he quietly reviewed design specs or silently sipped bourbon. On those nights, she didn't speak, but she didn't leave either. There was something in that unspoken ritual, a fragile routine, a shared space between power and invisibility. But when they did play, something electric unfolded between them. Not flirtation, something more precise, like two people learning the contours of each other's mind through tactics and sacrifice. Her play wasn't flamboyant, but exact. Brutal, when it had to be merciful when it didn't. It was during one of these quiet matches when the room smelled faintly of floor polish, and the only sound was the clack of rooks against wood, that Alexander asked the question he had been holding back. "Why are you still here?" Clara paused, a knight in her hand. "You mean this job?" "Yes." She placed the piece down gently, because it pays the bills, because stability is safer than starting over. "But you could be somewhere else, teaching competing." She looked up at him. "Not everyone gets second chances handed to them in crystal tumblers and mahogany boardrooms, Mr. Reed." Alexander didn't reply. Later that night, when she was gone and the chessboard reset again, he sat staring at the seat she'd just vacated. There was a part of him that wanted to help her genuinely, not out of guilt or pity, but from something deeper. Respect, admiration, maybe even debt. But he knew better than to offer too soon. He also knew she would never take it unless she earned it herself. 3 days later, he did something unusual. He left the office at 4:30 p.m. and drove himself, no driver, no schedule, to Southside Chicago. The neighborhood was where Veritas once claimed they'd build a community center, but never followed through. The streets were uneven. The lights blinked out too soon, and the old rec center near 53rd looked like it hadn't seen a coat of paint in 10 years. But the moment Alexander walked through the cracked glass doors, he heard it, the soft thrum of plastic chess pieces sliding across worn-out boards. He found her in a corner, coaching a group of kids barely old enough to tie their shoes. Clara knelt beside a wobbly table, demonstrating how to protect a backward pawn, while a small boy with missing front teeth watched her like she was magic. She hadn't seen him yet, and for a few moments, Alexander just stood there, leaning against a crooked support beam, watching her do what she was born to do. Not impress, not survive, just teach. He finally stepped forward when the kids were packing up. A few of them noticed the tall man in the expensive coat and whispered behind their sleeves. "You followed me?" Clara asked, rising slowly. I asked around. They said you volunteer here every Saturday. You stalk all your opponents, she said with a smirk. Only the ones who make me rethink everything I know about strategy. She didn't smile. Why are you here, really? Alexander hesitated. Because you deserve a stage. And this place, while good, can't be it forever. Don't, she said quietly. Don't come here with handouts or solutions wrapped in charity. I don't need your name on a building. He looked at her. Then let's talk about something that doesn't have my name on it. He pulled a folded flyer from his coat. It was for the upcoming Chicago Open chess tournament. Her eyes scanned the page, then narrowed. I'm not competing. You should. I'm 30. I work nights. I haven't trained in over a decade. You train every time you play me. Me. She shook her head. That's not the same. Alexander sighed, his voice softer. What if I told you I've already registered both our names? Not under Veritas, just initials. No one will know. She stared at him. You registered me, I did. I don't need a sponsor. I'm not your sponsor. I'm your student. If you say no, I'll withdraw too. But don't tell me you're not curious. She held the flyer in her hands, fingers curled along its crease. After a long pause, she finally spoke. I'll consider it, but only if we train the same way. Equal ground, no private coaches, no luxury setups. I play where you play. And if I win, she added, you'll stop treating me like a puzzle you need to solve. He nodded. And if I win? Clara folded the flyer again, tucked it into her jacket pocket. Then you'll know why it's not enough to win. That night back at the office, Alexander removed the expensive glass board from the lounge and replaced it with a scratched, travel-worn set he ordered from the same website used by community centers. When Clara entered the room just before midnight, she paused, noticing the change. No more ivory and crystal? She asked. He shrugged. I figured I should play on your terms. She looked at the board, then at him, and sat down without a word, somewhere between the first pawn move and the third quiet draw. Alexander realized something had changed. The matches weren't about dominance anymore. They were a dialogue. And Clara, she was no longer just a mystery. She was a mirror reflecting every part of him that success had dulled. And he was finally ready to look. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. At first, they came as idle comments in the hallways of Veritas Corp. He's been staying late a lot. Someone from marketing said, stirring cream into their coffee. I heard he's mentoring a staffer after hours. Another added tone laced with curiosity and suspicion. And then, inevitably, waiter the night janitor. By the end of the second week, Clara could feel it. Eyes lingered longer. Conversation stopped abruptly when she entered a room to clean. Elevators grew quiet when she stepped in. It was subtle at first, then sharpened like glass under bare feet. She tried to ignore it. She reminded herself that she'd survived worse poverty, sickness, grief. But this was different. This was corporate judgment. And it had teeth sharpened by class race and old money cloaked in polite smiles. One night after a training session with Alexander ended in yet another draw, she gathered her things quickly. You're in a hurry, he observed, setting his king back into its velvet slot. I've got other floors to mop, she said without looking at him. He leaned back. You're upset. No, she lied. Clara. I don't need a babysitter, Mr. Reed, she said sharply, finally meeting his eyes. Whatever this is between us, it's turning into ammunition for people who already think I don't belong here. Alexander's jaw tightened. He exhaled slowly. Do you want me to stop coming? That's not the point. Then what is? She hesitated. You may be used to being misunderstood and still winning, but I don't get that luxury. I play one game outside the rules and suddenly I'm getting favors or working an angle. He stared at her, then nodded, understood. The next morning, Clara found a note folded under the travel chessboard. "I'll stay out of sight for a while, but I'm still playing. If you are too, I'll leave my moves here one each night." And he did for 4 nights straight. When she entered the lounge, she found a single move made always on the same board, always followed by a small post-it with his handwritten notation, E4 NF3 BB5. She responded silently, leaving no notes of her own, only countermoves. It was strange, intimate in its own way, a conversation with no words, no audience, just the game, and the understanding that they were both still in it. Meanwhile, outside the safety of those evening exchanges, pressure mounted. Clara was called into HR. The room was white, impersonal. The kind of space where people were told they'd been restructured out of relevance. "We just want to ensure everything is professional," the woman in the beige blazer said, fake smile, unblinking. "There have been questions." "I clean floors," Clara said calmly, "and sometimes I play chess with the CEO." She nodded. After hours on his break, no money, no contracts, just chess. The HR woman smiled tighter. "You must understand how this appears. I understand appearance is often a luxury of those with titles," Clara replied, then stood. "Am I being disciplined?" "Oh," the woman said quickly, as if caught. "Then I have work to do." She left without another word. Later that night, she considered skipping her floor, letting someone else clean the executive lounge. But something pulled her back. When she walked in, the board was already mid-game. A queen sacrifice sat in the center, bold and unusual. She blinked, then smiled so he was paying attention. She played her counter. This time she didn't leave in silence. She left a note. "Nice try, but your diagonal was exposed 3 moves ago." C. The next day, Alexander called a closed-door meeting with his board of directors. They expected new product proposals, restructuring plans, quarterly charts. Instead, he handed them a 1-page memo titled Community Initiatives Directive, Southside STEM, and Chess Program Pilot. One board member raised an eyebrow. "You want to allocate funds to chess and mentorship," Alexander said flatly. "We've failed this part of the city before. It's time we did something real." "And the optics?" another asked. Given the rumors, Alexander looked up. "The optics are that we're a company who puts ideas into action, and the idea is simple. Talent doesn't always wear a badge with a corner office. Sometimes it holds a mop." They approved the pilot narrowly. 3 days later, Clara received a visitor at the rec center. A woman in a tailored green suit introduced herself as a representative from the Veritas Foundation. "We'd like to fund your Saturday program," she said gently. "Supplies, transportation, new boards, no conditions, anonymous donors." Clara narrowed her eyes. "Does this have anything to do with the man who always plays white?" The woman didn't answer, just smiled. That evening, Clara returned to the executive lounge. Alexander was there, standing not seated, hands clasped behind his back, as if he were awaiting judgment. She walked to the board, moved a piece, then sat. "So you're starting the game this time?" he asked. "I figure I've been letting you lead long enough." He smirked. "I had nothing to do with the donation," he added. "Of course you didn't. I didn't want to insult your pride." "It's not pride," she said, eyes on the board. "It's proof that people like me can get somewhere without being rescued." "Then let me offer a trade," he said. She glanced up. "You train for the tournament. I'll match you game for game. No coaches, no perks. Just you and me 5 mornings a week before the world wakes up." She considered him. "You trying to get better? I'm trying to keep up." Clara moved her bishop forward, then said, "Stop talking and start playing." And just like that, the game resumed, 2 players, 2 worlds, and 1 board that was never truly even until now. The alarm went off at 4:45 a.m., piercing the stillness of Clara's small apartment like a blade. She reached for it blindly, silencing the sound with a practice slap before sitting up. The apartment was quiet, still heavy with the scent of last night's lavender tea and worn-out floor polish from her uniform. By 5:15, she was walking through the south side streets, bundled in a windbreaker too thin for the Chicago cold, holding a battered canvas bag with one wooden chess set and a thermos of weak coffee. Her fingers ached, her eyes burned, but her mind was already calculating both moves and meaning. Alexander was already seated at the back booth of the cafe near Roosevelt in Wabash. The place opened early for the commuter crowd, and no one seemed to notice or care that the CEO of Veritas Corp sat sipping black coffee from a chipped ceramic mug with a woman in janitor shoes. "You're late," he said without looking up. "I'm always late when you try to play that smug little Scandinavian defense," Clara replied, sliding into the seat across from him. They didn't exchange pleasantries, no small talk, just opened the board and played. It became their routine. Every morning, 5 days a week, before the sun rose, and before the rest of the city took shape, they played, they studied, they tore each other's openings apart. And in between, something like friendship began to slip through the cracks. Quiet, reluctant, but undeniable. He brought real books, real theory, Nimzovich, Polgar, Kasparov. But Clara countered with muscle memory street matches, intuition sharpened by instinct rather than textbooks. She played like a fighter in the ring. He played like a tactician in a boardroom. But somewhere in the middle, they began to trade roles. One morning, after she trapped his queen behind a careless pawn, Advance Alexander leaned back and rubbed his temples. "I swear you're reading my thoughts." "I'm reading your habits," Clara said. "You don't know how to be uncomfortable, that's your biggest weakness." He stared at her. "I grew up uncomfortable," she added, setting up the next game. "You grew up insulated, there's a difference." Later that day, Alexander walked into the main boardroom to find the head of communications waiting with a printed blog post. "You've seen this?" the woman asked, laying it flat on the table. He scanned the title. CEO Mentors Janitor for Chess Tournament, Progressive Leadership or PR. Spin. Below it, blurry photos taken through the cafe window showed him and Clara hunched over a board, one of them mid-laugh. "This wasn't sanctioned." The woman continued, her tone tight, and the media's running with it. Alexander didn't flinch. "Good." "Sir, I said good," he repeated. "They want to talk about real leadership. Let them. If they want to talk about class divide power structures, second chance is even better." The woman blinked. "But this could be used against us. Let them try." Meanwhile, Clara was facing her own kind of storm. Someone had slipped a folded note into her locker at work. No name, no handwriting, just 3 words written in block print. "Know your place." She crumpled it slowly, not out of fear, but anger. Not the explosive kind, but the kind that simmers until it boils at the worst possible time. That evening she showed up late to the rec center. The kids were already finishing their tactics drills, and Coach Harris gave her a concerned glance. "You okay? I'm fine," Clara said quickly, dropping her bag. "You don't look fine." "I said I'm fine, okay?" She snapped at one of the older boys for being too slow on a rook exchange. The boy looked stunned. Clara had never raised her voice in months of teaching. After class, she sat in the corner of the gym, hands clenched into fists against her knees. Alexander found her there. He'd shown up unannounced again, but this time he didn't speak right away. He just stood near the bleachers, watching the flickering lights above them reflect off the scuffed wood floor. "You didn't show this morning," he said finally. "I know I waited an hour. I know." He stepped closer. "Talk to me." She looked up, eyes burning. You don't get to ask me to talk when you still get to walk into rooms and be heard without even opening your mouth. He blinked. What happened? I got a note. What did it say? Doesn't matter. It clearly does. She stood. People don't like what they can't control. You're used to being liked. I'm used to being erased. But right now I'm being noticed, and not for the right reasons. Alexander was quiet. I don't want to be your story, she added. Your redemption arc, your PR miracle, you're not. Then why does it feel like I'm standing in your shadow every time I try to step into the light? His face softened. Then step out. Clara stared at him. You think this is about me, Clara? I'm trying to get better because of you, not through you. You're not the footnote. I am. Her shoulders dropped slightly. The fire in her eyes dimmed but didn't vanish. After a pause, she said the tournament's in 3 weeks. I need space focus. He nodded. Then I'll see you at the board. No more cafe, no more photos. She picked up her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and walked toward the exit. Just before pushing the door open, she turned back. If I win, she said, I want you to clap like I'm a stranger. He smiled. And if you lose? She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because deep down, they both knew she wouldn't. The tournament hall buzzed with quiet anticipation, the kind that didn't need sound to feel loud. It was housed in a renovated hotel ballroom in downtown Chicago, with fluorescent lighting and beige walls that still carried the scent of old carpet glue. Rows of folding tables were lined up like soldiers, each one topped with regulation boards, plastic clocks, and half-open scorebooks. At one end, a long banner read, Chicago Open Chess Championship, sponsored by Illinois Chess Federation. Clara stood near the entrance, clutching her player badge like it was a grenade. She wore a simple navy blouse, slacks, and the same worn sneakers she always did, though she had scrubbed them until the rubber gleamed. Around her, competitors milled about grandmasters in sharp suits, teenage prodigies glued to tablets, a few middle-aged hobbyists adjusting their spectacles. She didn't fit, and yet she'd never felt more like she belonged. From across the room, Alexander Reed stepped in, not in a tailored suit this time, but in a gray hoodie and jeans, just another name on the list. He didn't approach her. He nodded once. She nodded back. It was enough. Clara's first match was against a middle-seated club player from Evanston. He underestimated her, immediately offering a condescending smile and attempting small talk about how brave she was to compete. She crushed him in 27 moves. Her second game was tighter. A young woman who played fast, aggressively, recklessly. Clara didn't take the bait. She slowed the tempo, broke the attack in half, and counterpunched until the girl's clock bled out. By the end of day 1, she was undefeated. But the whispers followed. Between rounds, Clara passed a group of spectators near the refreshments table. One leaned toward another and muttered, "Is that the janitor from the Veritas thing?" "She's not really self-made," the other said, sipping coffee. "She's got backing. You know how these narratives get built." Clara kept walking. She was used to being erased. But now they were rewriting her. At the same time, Alexander sat at the far end of the room, staring down his own opponents with quiet focus. He won some, lost one, drew 2. But that wasn't why he was here. He wasn't chasing trophies. He was chasing clarity. After her final match of the day, Clara headed for the hotel lobby to breathe. She needed distance from the boards, the stares, the slow, choking pressure of expectation. She didn't expect to find Alexander III leaning against a column, arms crossed, looking like he hadn't moved in hours. "You looked good in there," he said. He felt tight. He tilted his head. "You played like you'd already won. I played like I had something to lose." They didn't speak for a moment. Then she asked, "Why are you still here?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, because I think this might be the first time I've ever cared who wins besides myself. She gave him a look. "Okay," he amended, maybe second time. Clara sat on a bench, dropped her bag at her feet, and leaned forward. I heard them talking. Let me guess Alexander said sitting beside her. "You're a PR invention, a Cinderella story designed to distract from Veritas's latest tax filing. Something like that." He looked ahead. "I can't stop them from talking, Clara." "I don't need you to," she said. "I just need them not to matter." He nodded. "Then play tomorrow like they don't exist." "I intend to." She stood. But before she walked off, she said, "You said you cared who wins. You'll clap right, like a stranger." He smiled loud enough to embarrass myself. The second day moved like a pendulum swinging too fast. Clara's third-round opponent was a former college champion with a reputation for trash talk. He opened with the King's Indian and threw jabs between moves, commenting on her posture, her hand speed, even her hair. She didn't react. By move 14, she had sacrificed a bishop for a central pawn. By move 23, he realized the trap too late. "Check," she said calmly, moving her rook. He scowled. "That's not check." She raised her eyes. "Look again." He looked and froze. A beat passed. Then checkmate. She signed her score sheet. He didn't shake her hand. That evening, the final list of semi-finalists was posted outside the hall. Alexander made the cut, barely. So did Clara, at the very top. Their boards would be side by side in the semi-final. As she stared at the list, someone walked past and muttered just loud enough. "If she wins, it's because someone let her." She turned toward the voice, but no one stood still long enough to claim it. She didn't sleep that night. She lay in her hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was chasing victory or just running from the feeling of being less than. When she walked into the tournament hall the next morning, everything was louder, sharper cameras, reporters, the buzz of finality in the air. Alexander was already seated at board 3, ready to face a Latvian master with a brutal endgame style. Clara's seat was next to his board 4. Across from her sat a man she vaguely recognized. Tall, pale suit, tailored within an inch of its seams. He looked like a hedge fund manager. His smile never touched his eyes. He extended his hand. "Ready, Miss Evans?" She shook it. "I've been ready." The clock started, and Clara played. Not to prove not to silence, but to breathe. She sacrificed early, drawing him into space he thought he controlled. She defended with precision. She attacked with timing. Every piece moved like a beat in a song only she could hear. 43. Moves later, her opponent tipped his king. A murmur rose across the room. From the corner of her vision, she saw Alexander lose his own match. But when he looked over at her, his face split into a grin wider than anything she'd ever seen him wear. He clapped once, twice, then louder, until the whole hall followed. Reporters came forward. Officials handed her a crystal plaque, but none of it mattered. She looked at him, and he mouthed like a stranger. And for the first time in years, Clara felt not like a piece on the board, but the one moving them. The banquet room was too warm, too bright, and too full of people who had suddenly remembered Clara Evans' name. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, fingers wrapped around a tall glass of ginger ale she hadn't touched. The Crystal Championship trophy sat on a small table nearby, surrounded by imported cheeses, hand-cut fruit, and men in tuxedos who said words like inspiration and representation without understanding either. Alexander drifted nearby, surrounded by foundation directors and executive types, who all seemed to be trying to tie his name to her victory. He kept nodding politely, eyes scanning the room, searching for her through the shifting crowd. When he finally found her, Clara was staring at her own name engraved on the plaque, like she didn't quite believe it was real. He crossed the room slowly. "You okay?" he asked. "I've never been in a room with this much lobster and this many fake smiles." He chuckled. "You won, Clara. You changed the board." She exhaled. "Then why do I feel like I'm just a different kind of pawn?" Before he could answer, the governor of Illinois, who had shown up just for the photo op, approached, extending his hand with that campaign season warmth. "Miss Evans, your story has moved the entire state. We'd love to partner on an educational initiative, maybe a tour." Clara stared at him. "You mean you want to put me on a bus and let me talk to classrooms full of kids about how I got lucky?" The governor blinked. "Well, I wouldn't say lucky. You're exceptional." "I was always exceptional," she said quietly. "You just never noticed until now." He excused himself quickly. Alexander stepped closer. "You didn't have to burn him like that." "I didn't burn him. I lit the truth and let it sit there." Then she glanced up at him. "I want to leave. Now. Yeah. Can we walk?" Without another word, he signaled to a staffer, left the trophy where it was, and followed her out of the room. They exited through the service door and stepped into the night. The city air was crisp, sharp against the skin, but refreshing, like reality returning after too much illusion. They walked in silence for 3 blocks, turning onto a pedestrian path along the Chicago River, where the fairy lights from an old festival still shimmered across the water. "I'm proud of you," he said finally. "I didn't do it for you." "I know." They stopped at a railing overlooking the water. The hum of traffic was distant. Boats bobbed in the dark below. "I used to walk this path after my janitor shifts," Clara said, her voice softer now. "I'd stay until the sun came up just to remind myself I was still part of something bigger than fluorescent lights and wet floors. And now, I don't know." She turned to face him. "You ever feel like winning something just gives people permission to stop listening again?" He considered that. "You think they're listening now?" "No," she said. "I think they're watching." "It's not the same." Alexander leaned on the railing. "Then make them listen. Do something they can't ignore." Clara pulled her jacket tighter. "What?" "Start a YouTube channel. Write a memoir. Clara Evans. From mops to mastery." "I was thinking something quieter, something permanent." She raised an eyebrow. "I want you to run the Youth Chess Initiative. Full-time. Board position. Salary. Benefits. Your own team." "Oh." She stared at him. He added quickly, "Not from Veritas. From the non-profit you inspired, and you'll shape it. Not me. Is this another favor? No. This is repayment. For every game I lost to you that rewired my thinking. For every kid who saw you and realized they didn't have to disappear." She looked away. "You really believe that I believe you're not done yet, and I don't want to be the reason you fade back into the shadows." She didn't answer right away. Her hands rested on the railing, knuckles white from the cold. Then slowly she nodded. "All right," she said. "But on one condition. Name it. No more cameras, no press releases, no staged endorsements. Just the work." He held out his hand. "Deal." She shook it. They stood in silence again. Then she added, "You know I never played that final game for glory?" "I know." I played it so a girl like me wouldn't have to wait tables in the back of a hotel ballroom while someone else took credit for her brilliance." He nodded. "You didn't just win, Clara. You redefined the game." She looked at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Don't get poetic on me now." They started walking again, the city stretching around them, lights flickering, life humming. As they neared the end of the river walk, she asked, "So what now?" Alexander glanced sideways. "Now you teach. And you I learn." She laughed, the sound surprising them both. Then she said, "You're still terrible at closed positions, by the way." He grinned. "Then I guess I need more practice." That night, Clara returned home without the trophy. She didn't need it. It was just glass. But the memory of the applause, the sound of strangers clapping, not because they were told to, but because they chose to, echoed in her chest, long after the door shut behind her. In her living room, on the small table where her chessboard once sat, she laid down a single pawn piece. She stared at it, not as a servant, not as a sacrifice, but as the first step in the quiet, relentless journey of becoming something greater. And outside, the city kept moving, oblivious, indifferent, but alive, just like her. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The gymnasium smelled of wood polish floor wax and faint echoes of children's laughter. It was barely 8 a.m. on a Saturday, but already the folding tables were set up in neat rows, each topped with mismatched chessboards and a clutter of donated plastic pieces. A battered boombox in the corner played faint jazz, and the sunlight filtering through the tall windows painted gold rectangles across the floor. Clara stood at the center of it all, clipboard in one hand, her eyes scanning the room like a general preparing for battle. Except the soldiers were children, most of them under 12, wriggling in metal chairs too big for their frames. "All right, everyone," she called, voice steady but warm. "Pawns to the center. We start in 10. A ripple of excitement passed through the group. It had been exactly 32 days since she'd won the Chicago Open. Not that she counted. Not anymore. The trophy remained boxed in a storage closet at the non-profit's office, gathering dust beside an old broken air purifier and stacks of unused pamphlets. Clara didn't want it on a shelf, didn't need it as a reminder. The work reminded her. She had officially stepped into her new role 2 weeks prior. Director of the Chicago Youth Chess Initiative. A mouthful of a title, she joked to Alexander, but one she wore like armor. The job came with a small office, a modest salary, and a mountain of expectations. Clara didn't care about the first two, but the third, that weight, she carried it with reverence. "Coach, Clara," a small voice called. She turned to see Tasha, a lanky 9-year-old with braids and a tendency to play knight moves backward, waving a worksheet. "I beat Jamal in 4 moves yesterday." "You sure he wasn't asleep?" Clara teased. Tasha giggled. "I even did the back rank mate thing you showed us." Clara grinned. "Then you're officially dangerous." As she turned back to the front, she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure leaning against the wall near the entrance. Alexander stood there, hands in pockets, watching quietly like he belonged to the background. He had become a regular visitor, though never during instruction. He respected the boundary. He brought books, new sets, even snacks for the kids, always without fanfare. The staff had learned to accept him as that tall donor guy who always loses to Coach Clara. After class ended and the kids swirled out into the hallway in a flurry of sneakers and backpacks, Clara approached him. "You lurking again?" she asked. "I prefer the term monitoring strategic deployment." She smirked. "You just like watching them get better than you." Guilty. They walked together toward the coffee machine in the tiny staff kitchen. He poured her a cup without asking. She took it like it was habit. like they had done this 100 times before. "How's the nonprofit board treating you?" she asked. "Like a science experiment they don't understand but can't stop funding." She chuckled. "They want a public campaign," he added. "Profiles, interviews. They think the next step is taking the Clara story national." Her smile faded. "And what do you think I think if you want to spend the rest of your life building kids instead of brands, you should?" "Oh." She leaned against the counter, staring into her coffee. "I'm tired of being a symbol," she admitted, "of being the person they point to when they want to feel good about broken systems. You're not a symbol, Clara. You're an engine. You keep moving. The rest of them have to follow." "That's a nice metaphor." He smiled. "I'm full of them. I should have been a poet, or a chess piece." She tilted her head. "You'd be a rook. Straight lines, no nuance." Ouch. She sipped, then asked, "How are you really?" Alexander paused. "Different. Better maybe. The boardroom's quieter now. My decisions are slower, more deliberate." She looked at him with something between amusement and respect. "That's either wisdom or early onset fatigue. Possibly both." He set his cup down. "Seriously though, you've built something here. And I'm not just talking about the kids." She raised an eyebrow. "You built belief, structure, legacy, and you did it without making it about you." Clara shrugged. "The minute this becomes about me, it stops being real." He nodded. "Then let's keep it real." She glanced at the clock. "I've got a parent meeting in 10 minutes. Alexander stepped back. "I'll head out. But hey, there's something else." She paused. "There's a citywide youth invitational next month. Big sponsors. Big visibility. I was asked to nominate a coach to lead the Chicago team. And I put your name down." She narrowed her eyes. "Without asking." "You would have said no, exactly." He shrugged. "Now you get to say yes." She sighed, but didn't argue. As he turned to go, she called after him. "Why are you still showing up?" He stopped, then looked back. "Because this," he said, sweeping a hand toward the room behind her, "is the best thing I've ever been lucky enough to stand beside." She watched him leave. The door swinging closed behind him with a soft click. Back in the gym, she found the single pawn piece she always left out on the demo board. She turned it in her fingers slowly, the plastic warm from the sun. Then carefully she placed it on the 8th rank. The end of the board. The beginning of everything else. The auditorium was older than most of the students sitting in it. The ceiling tiles had yellowed at the edges, and the stage lights flickered with the rhythm of time-worn wiring. But on that afternoon, with rows of folding chairs filled by families, coaches, and city officials, the space pulsed with something new. Pride, tightly coiled anticipation, and the unmistakable thrum of recognition. Clara stood at the side of the stage, adjusting the collar of her navy blazer. It still felt strange wearing something that didn't smell like bleach or carry the weight of a mop strap on her shoulder. Her shoes were clean polished. Her name tag didn't say custodial staff anymore. It said coach, and just beneath it, in smaller letters, Director Chicago Youth Chess Initiative. The final round of the citywide invitational had just ended, and the students she'd brought from Southside were still buzzing, laughing, comparing moves, passing around the cheap gold-colored medals like they were Olympic gold. They hadn't won the whole thing. But one of her students, Tasha, had made it to the top 5. And that Clara thought was enough to turn the page. The MC cleared his throat. "And now, before we end today's ceremony, we'd like to recognize someone without whom none of this would have been possible." Clara felt her stomach twist. No, not this. But the spotlight was already moving. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the woman behind the board, Clara Evans." Applause erupted. Real applause. Not the polite golf clap kind, but something deeper. From the kids, the parents, even the volunteers who had shown up just to stack chairs and hand out juice boxes. And somewhere in the back, standing and clapping slow but steady, was Alexander. Clara stepped onto the stage. The podium microphone was too tall. She adjusted it with hands that somehow weren't shaking. "I didn't come here to be seen," she began, voice steady. "I came here because I thought if I could help one kid believe they were more than what their neighborhood, their school, or their past told them, then that would be enough." The room quieted. "But you've all shown me that I was aiming too small. You don't just want to believe, you want to build. And you have." She paused. "There was a time not long ago when the only thing people noticed about me was the cart I pushed. Not my name, not my mind, certainly not my game." Scattered nods, some tears. "But the beauty of chess," she said, "is that even the smallest piece can change the entire board if it's brave enough to cross it." A beat passed, then thunderous applause. After the ceremony, Clara ducked behind the curtains, needing a breath, a beat, a moment to fold the noise into something she could carry. She didn't expect to find Alexander waiting there, leaning against a stack of stage props, with 2 coffees in hand. "I figured you wouldn't want champagne," he said. She took the cup, blew gently on the lid, and murmured, "You figured right." They sat on a stairwell backstage. The noise from the auditorium hummed on the other side of the curtain. "You did it," he said. "We did it." He looked at her. "No, Clara. You did." She smiled faintly. "You're really bad at letting people deflect credit," he grinned. "I'm in recovery." They sipped in silence for a moment. Then he asked, "What's next?" Clara looked down at her cup. More kids, more boards, more mornings where someone doesn't think they can win until they do. "And you?" She shrugged. "I'll keep showing up, keep listening, keep moving forward." Alexander nodded. "I have something for you." She frowned. "If it's another foundation plaque with my face on it, I swear I'll throw it in the river." He laughed and reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small, flat box. He handed it to her. She opened it. Inside was a single carved chess piece. A queen made of polished black walnut, its base engraved with 5 words. "Every move you made mattered." Clara stared at it for a long time before speaking. "I'm not used to keepsakes." "You should be," he said quietly. "You're someone worth remembering." She closed the box gently, the sound of the lid soft but final. "Thank you." They stood together, neither in a hurry. Before they parted, he asked, "Do you ever regret it?" "What?" "Taking the match that night. Sitting down at that board." She shook her head. "No. I regret every day before that one, when I convinced myself I didn't deserve to." Outside, the sun was beginning to dip below the rooftops. The city breathed on without fanfare, without spectacle. But something had changed. Not in the skyline, not in the headlines, but in the hearts of the kids who now believed they had a place on the board. In the game, and in the story, and in the heart of one woman who had finally stopped walking with her head down. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Clara placed the carved queen next to the pawn on her table. 2 pieces, one beginning, one becoming, and the board in between hers now, always hers.